in managing this relationship. We wish them well.
My Lords, it's a great pleasure to be able to follow the very thoughtful speech given by the noble Lord Goodlad. I think the last time we were together at a public event was at the launch of the diaries of the noble Lord Patten, in which Sir Percy Cradock features quite prominently. Anyone, of course, wanting to understand the betrayal of the people of Hong Kong should most certainly read the noble Lord Patten's diaries. My Lords, I declare my interests as Vice Chair of the All-Party Groups on Uyghurs and on Hong Kong. I'm a patron of Hong Kong Watch and a member of the Interparliamentary Alliance on China. Notwithstanding the disappointment that it's taken so long for the Select Committee report to be debated, I'd like to put on record my own personal thanks to the noble Baroness Lady Ainley for her superb chairmanship of the committee and for navigating us through controversial issues to produce a report which moves the debate beyond the naivety of the golden era, which was, Lord Patten of Barnes told us, I quote, an example of doubtless well-meaning failure, and tackles hugely important questions about trade and security, not least the gaping wounds of lost national resilience and our phenomenal dependency on a country which stands accused of genocide. Sir Malcolm Rifkin told us that China had, I quote, become much closer to a totalitarian state than at any time since the death of Mao Zedong. We heard what we called conclusive evidence that China also poses a significant threat to UK's interests, particularly in the light of the tilt to the Indo-Pacific region. We concluded that the UK has had a lack of clarity and a policy of deliberate, constructive ambiguity, as my noble and gallant friend Lord Stirrup has reminded us, and what Lord Patten referred to as cakeism of the 2021 integrated review, both regarding China as a systemic competitor and an important partner. The report criticises the failure to provide any details on how the government will balance plans for increased economic engagement with the need to protect the UK's wider interests and values, and calls on the government to produce a single coherent China strategy, warning of serious risks to our security and prosperity, including to our international trade and investments over the longer term. This month's government announcement that China is to be formally designated a threat to Britain rather than a systemic competitor is a belated but very welcome move towards a clearer strategy, and follows the recent warnings by Jeremy Fleming, the head of GCHQ, and about the CCP's efforts to exploit control and surveillance capabilities in emerging technologies, such as satellite location systems and digital currencies, which he said represent a threat to us all. I've got 8 questions to the Minister about specific threats, to which I hope that he'll be able to give us some answers today, and if not, that he'll agree to write to us. Firstly, during the passage of the telecommunications legislation, the government said it would strip out G5 Huawei components in our telecom network. This removal of 5G was to happen in January 2023 with fines if the deadline wasn't met. Now we're told that there will be delays, even though designated vendor direction has been issued identifying, their words, covert and malicious functionality which could be embedded in Huawei equipment. My Lord, when will the decision on Huawei be fully complied with? Secondly, why has the government, unlike the United States, still made no ban on the removal of Hikvision and Dahua cameras made in Xinjiang and used to collect data up and down the length and breadth of the United Kingdom? There is an opportunity, my Lords, inside the procurement bill to remedy this, and I wonder if the noble Lord the Minister will be able to tell us whether that opportunity will be taken at report stage of that bill. Thirdly, my Lords, on Monday, this was referred to by the noble Lord Goodlad and others, the Minister told us that the assault on Bob Chan, the young man at the Chinese consulate in Manchester, was a very serious incident, the noble Lord the Minister's words. I met Bob Chan yesterday. Can the Minister tell us when the Greater Manchester Police are likely to provide a report to him and to the Foreign Secretary, and spell out the consequences when the brutality for which the CCP is renowned is exported to the UK threatening indeed the safety of the 130,000 and more Hong Kongers who fled to the United Kingdom under the government's admirable BNO resettlement scheme. I draw the attention of the Noble Lord, the Minister, to this column in today's Times newspaper, written by Jawad Iqbal, a freelance journalist, who says that what has happened at Manchester is an affront to British democratic norms and values. Fourthly, my lords, the BBC reported last week that up to 30 former UK military pilots are believed to have gone to train members of China's People's Liberation Army, lured by the CCP with large sums of money to pass on their expertise to the Chinese military. My lords, what are we doing to address that threat? Fifthly, with the Noble Baroness, Baroness Ainley, and the Noble Lord, Lord Anderson of Swansea, we were in two of the Gulf states last week and were concerned to learn of joint military exercises between China, Russia, and Iran. So imagine my consternation on return on reading a report in the Telegraph that, and I quote, British academics have collaborated on thousands of research papers with Chinese military scientists, according to a government-funded report that universities sought to then suppress, end quote. My lords, 13,415 collaborative partnerships with China, Russia, and Iran were identified. 11,611 were between Chinese and British academics. Why was the report suppressed? And what are we doing in partnership as sensitive as railgun design, hypersonic missiles, and tracking systems for nuclear submarines? Why are we sharing expertise or developing partnerships to do those things? Sixthly, my lords, despite our intelligence service publicly warning Parliament of the presence of CCP operatives and spies on our parliamentary estate, with one claiming that she'd even secured amendments to legislation in your lordship's house, why has no action been taken to bring her here, for instance, and to answer questions about these subversive activities? And seventhly, in addition to subversion of UK institutions, we've seen the subversion of international institutions, with the votes of countries being bought and linked to Belt and Road indebtedness. How are we countering this? What will be included, for instance, in the National Security Bill currently in another place to limit interference by people operating on behalf of the Chinese state? And eighthly, finally amongst my questions I want to ask, the Noble Lord the Minister is rightly regarded as one of this country's leading champions of renewable energy and sustainability. What does he make of reports drawn to my attention by the Noble Lord Hunt of Kingsheath that BMW is to stop producing electric cars in England in 2023 and moving the production of electric minis from Cowley to China? Last year, Cowley made around 40,000 electric minis. Why are we ceding our aspirations to be a leader in global electric car manufacturing? What can be done about this? How can we avert it? I'll have more to say, if I may, about resilience and dependency later. It was Ken McCallum, MI5's Director General, who said, what is a risk from the Chinese Communist Party aggression? The world-leading expertise, technology, research and commercial advantage developed by technology companies and universities in the UK. We have to take that seriously, my lords. And in addition to threats to cybersecurity and technology, our committee's report highlighted threats to maritime security in the Indo-Pacific region, to Taiwan, as we've heard, where we said conflict would be, the word, catastrophic, and that managing this risk should be the government's top strategic priority. We raised serious maritime threats, the imposition of the national security law, the trashing of an international treaty, and destruction of democracy in Hong Kong, all illustrative of the CCP's contempt for international rules-based order, and what Michelle Bachelet recently described as crimes against humanity in Xinjiang in a report which was commissioned by the UN itself. In his evidence to the committee, Charles Parton went further and said that genocide, not crimes against humanity, but outright genocide is underway in Xinjiang. And when she was Foreign Secretary, Elizabeth Truss said the same. The appalling treatment of the mainly Muslim Uyghurs, which was referred to by the Noble Baroness Lady Blackstone, has included intense surveillance, much of it manufactured by Hikvision, mass detentions, forcible sterilisation and insertion of IUDs, forced migration, the kidnapping of Uyghur children abducted from their parents and placed in state institutions, accompanied by terrible violence, torture and killing. Both Sir Geoffrey Nice QC's independent tribunal and the Holocaust Museum found evidence of coercive interventions of the Chinese government to prevent sizable numbers of Uyghurs from coming into being, suggesting that the deliberate goal, I quote, is to biologically destroy the group in whole or in substantial part. Nice's tribunal concluded that this is indeed genocide. I asked the same question to the minister today that I put to George Osborne when he appeared before the committee. It wasn't a question about whether we should trade with countries that commit human rights violations, because you could identify countries throughout the world who commit human rights violations. It was, is it licit to do business as usual with a state credibly accused of genocide, which is the crime above all crimes? In our report, we recommend that the government should incorporate an atrocity prevention lens in its overall approach to trade. Current prevention atrocity tools and strategies have fallen short. My lords, when will the government do this? And then there is, as I said I would return to it, our appalling dependency on the CCP. Compare it with the clarity of their strategy of undermining resilience and security, acquiring intellectual property and data, destroying competitiveness through slave labour in everything from green energy to surveillance equipment. One of the CCP's reasons for wanting to destroy the freedoms of Taiwan's 23 million people is to control the production of the world's semiconductors, the cornerstone of modern economies. One Taiwanese company, TSMC, makes over 80% of the world's most advanced semiconductors. And meanwhile, further illustrating our incoherent strategy, we seriously consider allowing the sale to China of Newport Wafer Fab, our biggest producer of semiconductors. My lords, as Germany has discovered, love affairs with dictatorships come at a terrible price. Where does the sale of Newport Wafer Fab now stand, my lords? During our inquiry, I was surprised to hear witnesses tell us how fortunate we were that China had made available invaluable help during the pandemic, a pandemic that had its origins in Wuhan. This included a reluctant admission that the government had bought 1 billion lateral flow tests from China. They subsequently confirmed they bought 24.1 billion items of personal protective equipment, where China is recorded as the country of origin, at a phenomenal cost of £10.9 billion. That's about the equivalent of the entire reduced British overseas aid budget. And, my lords, this isn't philanthropy. Increasingly, developing nations are being turned into dependent vassal states. And when we saw that recent vote on the Bachelet report on the Uyghurs in the Human Rights Council, the votes of those who voted with China not to even debate that report have been bought via indebted dependency. A diplomat recently said it was like having a 1,000-pound gorilla on my back. Note too that by September, in the face of a global food crisis, China had given $10 million to the World Food Programme, compared with $5 billion from the United States of America. We see the same attempted systematic appropriation and subversion of international institutions, including the World Health Organization and the World Trade Organization. Xi Jinping and the CCP have demonstrated time and time again that they're unwilling to abide by international treaties, that they're untrustworthy, that they're cruel and unpredictable. This includes when it comes to the ongoing breach of the Sino-British Joint Declaration and the human rights crackdown in Hong Kong, the crimes against humanity or genocide taking place in Xinjiang, the launching of trade wars against countries like Lithuania and Australia, the unlawful detention of Canadian diplomats, and the flouting of basic obligations under the WHO when it comes to sharing information regarding pandemics. Ministers could do well to look at the Biden administration and recent legislation in the US Congress, including the CHIPS Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, to see a government willing to invest in domestic industry, tackle climate change, and reduce its dependency on authoritarian regimes. My lords, if the West wants to protect itself, it must face up to the reality of the CCP's history and its future intentions. Executions, famine, deaths through forced labour and mass deportations, forced sterilisation and coercive abortion, purges of opponents, incarceration for dissent, or unwillingness to comply with a brutal ideology. These are all the hallmarks of the CCP. with Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping signing a declaration that there will be no limits to their friendship, we must underline, as the noble Lord Campbell reminded us, is of crucial importance, that we build our international partnerships and alliances through NATO, AUKUS and elsewhere. To conclude, the CCP has been holding its rubber stamp Congress, obsessed with control, evidenced by their lockdown policy. It's veering in the direction of belligerent nationalism. But as Tank Man in Tiananmen Square in 1989, the Bridge Man on Sitong Bridge last week, or Bob Chan protesting in Manchester on behalf of those who remain in Hong Kong, and the brave people of Taiwan, Ukraine, and the young women of Iran have demonstrated, authoritarians often overestimate their hold on power. Liu Xiaobo, the Chinese writer and dissident and Nobel laureate, and who died in 2017 after serving 4 prison sentences, said this: "There's no force that can put an end to the human quest for freedom." He was right.
My Lords, it's a privilege to follow